You're 26 years old, you've got maybe $11,000 saved, a job you don't hate but don't love either, and you just watched a documentary about some guy who built a holding company worth $500 million. And instead of closing the laptop and going to sleep like a normal person, you open a notes app and type one sentence. How does someone actually go from 0 to 500 million? And that question is going to consume the next 15 years of your life. My name is Soren, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, holding companies, and why almost nobody understands the actual mechanics of building one. Because it's not glamorous. It's not a single big bet. It's a boring compounding machine built one acquisition at a time. And if you stick with me through this entire walkthrough, you're going to understand exactly how people quietly build empires while everyone else is still trying to pick the next hot stock. Step 1, you don't start by buying a business. You start by buying yourself an education in cash flow. Because a holding company at its core is just a vehicle that owns other companies. And before you own anything, you need to understand what makes a business worth owning, which means you spend your first year or two learning to read a set of financials the way most people read a text message, quickly, instinctively, and without getting confused by the numbers. Step 2 is where the real work begins. You save aggressively, not because saving alone makes you rich, but because you need what's called dry powder, a war chest sitting in cash that lets you move the moment an opportunity appears. And most people skip this step entirely because delayed gratification is boring and nobody wants to drive a used Honda for 3 extra years while their friends are leasing something flashy. Step 3, you make your first acquisition. And here's the part that surprises everyone. It's small, it's unglamorous. Maybe it's a local laundromat. Maybe it's a boring HVAC repair company. Maybe it's a small landscaping business the owner wants to retire from. And you don't buy it because it's exciting. You buy it because it throws off consistent cash flow, and the seller is motivated enough to finance part of the deal themselves, which means you might put down 20% and structure the rest as a seller note, effectively using the business's own future profits to pay for itself. Step 4 is survival mode, because your first acquisition is going to humble you. Equipment breaks. Employees quit without notice. A customer you were counting on disappears. And this is the year where most people quit and go back to a stable paycheck. But the ones who make it through learn something that no business school ever teaches, which is how to actually operate a company under pressure instead of just theorizing about one. Step 5, once that first business is stable and profitable, you don't spend the profits. You reinvest almost every single dollar back into finding acquisition number 2. And this is where the holding company structure starts to actually matter. Because instead of the profits from business 1 sitting in your personal account getting taxed and spent, they flow up into the parent company where they can be redeployed into buying business 2 without you ever touching the money personally. Step 6 is acquisition number 2. And by now you've got a track record, which means banks are suddenly a lot more willing to lend you money. Because you're no longer some random person with a business plan. You're someone who already owns a profitable company, and that credibility alone can unlock financing options that simply didn't exist for you a year earlier. Step 7, you start noticing a pattern that most first-time buyers miss entirely, which is that certain boring industries throw off way more cash than people assume. Things like pest control, commercial cleaning, plumbing, and equipment rental. Because these businesses have recurring revenue, low customer churn, and owners who are often aging out and desperate to sell to literally anyone who seems competent. And this realization is the moment your strategy shifts from opportunistic buying to intentional hunting. Step 8, you hire your first operator. Someone who runs the day-to-day of business 1 so you can focus entirely on acquisitions. And this is the step where your holding company stops being a side hustle you manage personally and starts becoming an actual portfolio. Because your job is no longer running businesses. Your job is allocating capital and finding good people to run them for you. Step 9, you make acquisitions 3 and 4 in the same 18-month window. because momentum in this game compounds fast once you understand the playbook. And each new business adds to your combined cash flow, which means your dry powder for the next deal grows faster than it did the first time around. And this is usually the point where your net worth crosses 7 figures for the first time, and it barely even feels real. Step 10, and this is a mistake almost everyone makes here. You get overconfident and buy something outside your competency. Maybe a business in an industry you don't understand. Maybe one with messier financials than you're used to. And it underperforms, sometimes badly. And this lesson costs you real money. But it teaches you the single most important rule in this entire game, which is that you only buy inside your circle of competence, no matter how good the multiple looks on paper. Step 11, you course correct and go back to boring, predictable, cash-flowing businesses. And you start systematizing your acquisition process, building relationships with business brokers, accountants, and attorneys who specialize in small business sales. Because deal flow at this stage isn't about luck anymore. It's about having a pipeline that consistently brings opportunities to you instead of you chasing every listing yourself. Step 12, your holding company crosses 10 million in combined revenue across its portfolio. And something shifts. Sellers start coming to you instead of the other way around, because word travels in small business circles, and a reputation as someone who closes deals fairly and quickly becomes one of your most valuable assets, more valuable in some ways than the capital itself. Step 13. You start using more sophisticated financing, bringing in outside investors for larger deals, structuring earnouts where sellers get paid based on future performance, and using the combined cash flow of your existing portfolio as collateral to unlock bigger acquisitions than you could ever fund with savings alone. And this is the point where the size of deals you can pursue jumps dramatically. Step 14. You acquire your first business north of 10 million in enterprise value, something that would have been unthinkable a few years earlier. And you do it by combining debt financing, seller financing, and equity from your existing portfolio, essentially using the machine you built to fund its own expansion. Step 15. Your holding company crosses 50 million in combined portfolio value. And at this point, you're no longer thought of as an individual investor. You're thought of as an acquirer, a serious buyer that industry insiders keep on their radar. And that reputation alone starts generating inbound deal flow that dwarfs anything you could have found by cold calling business owners yourself. Step 16. You start acquiring adjacent businesses within the same industries you already operate in, buying a competitor here, a complementary service there, creating what's called operational synergy, where two businesses under the same roof can share back-office costs, cross-sell to each other's customers, and operate more efficiently combined than they ever could apart. Step 17. You cross 100 million in combined value, and the businesses you own now generate enough consistent cash flow that you could theoretically stop acquiring altogether and just live comfortably off the distributions. But by this point, the game itself has become the point. You're not chasing the money anymore. You're chasing the next deal because building has become who you are. Step 18. You start acquiring larger, more established companies with existing management teams already in place, which means you're no longer even hiring operators yourself. You're simply evaluating whether the existing leadership is strong enough to keep running things well under new ownership, and your role shifts almost entirely into pure capital allocation. Step 19. Your holding company crosses 250 million, and outside capital starts actively seeking you out. Private equity firms, family offices, and institutional investors want to partner with you on larger deals because your track record speaks for itself at this point. And access to capital that used to be your biggest constraint has essentially disappeared. Step 20. You cross 500 million in combined portfolio value. And here's the part that will genuinely surprise you if you ever get here. It doesn't feel like some explosive fireworks moment. It feels like the natural, almost inevitable conclusion of 15 years of boring, disciplined, unglamorous decisions made one at a time, buying cash-flowing businesses, reinvesting the profits, learning from the failures, and repeating the process patiently, while everyone else was looking for a shortcut that never actually existed. And that's the real secret nobody wants to hear. This entire journey from 0 to 500 million was never about one brilliant idea or one lucky break. It was about doing the same disciplined thing over and over long after it stopped being exciting. Because the people who actually build empires aren't the ones chasing the loudest opportunity in the room. They're the ones quietly buying the boring businesses nobody else wanted, while everyone else was still waiting for permission to start.